Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO, Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We couldn't do it without you. Truly honored and grateful for Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, for his contribution of his time, his voice, and his music for the intro that you just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on any of your favorite music streaming platforms. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners and logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. He also specializes in the horror genre, but does unbelievable commission pieces and can do anything, including animated books, comics, things like that. Just wild. In fact, I think he did one of his own. You guys might know it for The Harvester. Yeah, gotta check that out. I think they were thinking about making a movie about that one. So definitely worth checking out. Tonight, we welcome back the return of our dear friend and frequent flyer, as we like to say, Preston Dennett, who's going to be discussing his latest book, Humanoids and High Strangeness. I have to be waiting for this because anybody who knows me knows I'm forever saying high strangeness because it's all this crazy stuff out there and you really don't know how to actually label something like that. So without further ado, here we go. Let's check out this high strangeness bit. Hello. How are you?
I'm good, Michelle. How are you?
Wired. Been a day, Preston. Been a day. So how are you?
I'm enjoying life on Earth. You know, you got to have fun.
You have to have fun. I know. If there's no fun, you know, there's just no point, right? It's just lay it out on the line. It's a traffic day, guys. That's all. It's just a traffic day. We just got bombarded with all kinds of traffic in here. So after a while, you just sort of need that wind down time. This is my wind down time here with Preston, which is really nice. So I've been really excited about this new book because I know we've been talking about this for a few months and it's like, okay, yep, you know, book's going to be ready. And I'm like, let's do it. And you just been kind of like leading me around, like, you know, like a fish going after the worm. So, and now, ta-da, we're here. So I'm going to put this up. I want everybody to see this. There we go. There we go.
Isn't that a cool cover?
That's a great cover. That's a great cover.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite. My sister-in-law actually drew that.
Wow. She's very talented. You had her on the show, you know, on the Light Gate, which you guys do, yourself and Dolly, every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. And you had her on and she showed quite a few of her images.
Yeah, she was quite shy. She's like, I don't really do shows, but I'll do it for you. So
I think it was great because she's very talented and she does most of your book covers, if not all of them. Is that right?
Yeah, well, the last 10 or so. So yeah, pretty much most. There was a few which I wish she had done.
Wow.
But no, she didn't get a chance.
Oh, well, I mean, the great thing about it is that you know, books are meant to change and be edited, and special edition books with really, you know, just got to give it a little nudge.
But I had one reprinted actually, so I was able to put her pictures in it and have her do the cover as well.
Oh, wow. There you go. There's some incentive. This is a beautiful, beautiful cover. It just speaks a lot of volume. Like it speaks volumes when you see it. I just love a whole cosmic part of it and the whole Da Vinci sort of idea with the ET. So what made you choose this title? I'm very curious. Humanoids, yes, I get. But high strangeness is obviously one of my favorite topics. So,
Yeah, well, anytime I put out a new book, one of the first things I do is go into Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and I type in the title,
right.
and 20 or more of the same title pop up.
Oh boy.
So I'd like to find something unique.
Right.
That was one thing I was looking for.
Oh, it's very unique.
Humanoids. I mean, that's the theme of the book. So all my books usually have a theme to them, and this one is all the different types of humanoids.
Right.
But as I was going through it, I'm like, there's an awful lot of high strangeness, a lot of paranormal, all different kinds of humanoids. I thought, you know what? I think that might make a good title. Let's punch that in, see if anything comes up, and nothing did. So I'm like, got it. That's what I'm going to call it.
Mine. Right. So, choosing 20 stories for this book, what was the idea behind it? What did you have to do to qualify to have your story in here? Because high strangeness, I think we go back to how much everything is connected in the field of paranormal, cryptozoology, ufology. They all do tie in on many levels, don't they?
Exactly. And that's what I really wanted to embrace in this book, because I know that there are authors out there, and I know this for a fact, who have interviewed people, because I've talked to their interviewees who appeared in their books.
Right.
Their stories were edited out. The high strangeness was not in there.
Wow.
I thought, you know what? That's not right.
Right. Right.
I really wanted to just fully embrace it. And having learned each time I do a book how to interview a little bit better and ask the hard questions, I brought it all in. I'm like, tell me anything strange that's happened to you, because I do think it's connected. And I especially do now, because this book really drove that home for me. Each time I write a new book, I get some revelations, I would say.
Right.
Full on high strangeness. And
did you get anything that stands out that goes, or have you heard it all now? And it's just,
No, there was a few that stood out. I mean, one guy saw an elf, and that kind of what? I'd had a few people tell me that, and I was kind of iffy about it. But he drew it. It was, incredibly detailed.
Right. But that makes sense. I think there's, when you get into fairies and elves and gnomes. I don't like gnomes. Everybody knows that. I'm going to put that out there. But, when you're getting into a lot of these interdimensional beings, I mean, they are, in fact, out of this world, high strangeness, extraterrestrial, terrestrial. Like, how do we label that? That's an elf. I don't know. Is it a friendly elf? Because they can be pretty aggressive, Are we talking like a Legolas elf, or we're just talking to like elf on the shelf elf? That's what I want to know. There's a difference,
Well, that's what's really cool about this book, is because I wanted to bring in every type of humanoid I could find. So I have angelic accounts, a Mother Mary sightings, some spirits, some really dark, like one involves a demonic hairy dwarf, but certainly grays, praying mantis, human-looking ETs, tall whites, little blue beings. I love that case. So, and I've got some of the pictures of these guys that the people drew for me.
Yeah, please feel free to share. I mean, praying mantis. I have to say, a praying mantis, thankfully not like a big one, just a little one, dropped on the hood of the vehicle, like out of nowhere, a couple of days ago, and all you heard was boom. And I'm looking. It's just this thing. It's really aggressive, flapping its wings at me. Like, wow, man.
That's just the 4-inch one. It's not like the 4-foot tall one.
I know. So I'm a little put off. I'm just thinking that you landed on like my vehicle, man. If you're all put up, that's not my fault. Oh yeah, it was like turning its back, spinning itself around, flapping its wings, and putting its back up. I'm just like, okay. I'm really glad you're not like an 8-footer. So yeah.
That would be unnerving, though I have to say that the lady who saw the mantid, one of the main cases in the book, was very friendly the whole time.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's one of those don't say don't judge a book by its cover, but I've really heard horrific stories about them.
I heard some what I would call scary stories.
Yeah.
I can see that it would be very scary if you find yourself standing next to a bug that's twice as tall as you.
Yeah.
People don't like bugs anyway. And rarely do people say,
Yeah.
hey, look, a spider, let's pet it.
Right, right. I mean, there are some people who've written stories and books about their experience with them, who's claimed their lives have just been ruined. But it's like you say, I mean, that would be pretty unnerving. You know, if you're going to fight back, I don't imagine it's going to go well for you.
Yeah, well, the cases I have not been what I would call horrific. I mean, one guy, this is a previous book, but Kevin Kamen, a Navy medic, had an encounter where he was pulled on board. And he didn't want to turn around and look at them. He was afraid, but he was conversing with them. And they basically said, here's where we come from. He's like, are you going to eat me? And they said, no, we're not going to eat you. We eat fish and vegetables and fruits and this kind of thing.
Right.
And he asked a bunch of questions like, is Roswell real? And they said, yes, it is. All the governments, the major governments are aware of us. They said, since you started exploding nuclear weapons, you started a countdown clock, and all these things will happen. And they showed him all these disasters, mostly hurricanes, but tornadoes and landslides and earthquakes. Mm-hmm. So finally, he's like, what do you look like? And they said, well, we're not little and we're not green. And they said that because he had asked his friend, who was a contactee, I want to meet your little green friends. And it was his friend who actually arranged this meeting and got him pulled on board.
Wow.
Yeah, and he never thought in a million years that would happen. But of course it did.
Right.
So he
and this is a big mantis standing there.
Yeah. He turns around and there's three of them. And they're on these kind of white, sort of stone-looking chairs.
Right.
And you can tell instantly they're quite tall. But one stands up and takes 3 steps towards him. He said this darn thing was 15 feet tall.
Yeah, see right there. And I'm squawking about an 8-footer. Hell, I'm squawking about a 4-incher landing on my car, being all aggressive. So that is insane. That is, I can't even fathom that.
He said it's one eyeball was as big as a basketball, as big as his head. I mean, just huge.
Wow.
Bone white, just completely white, super thin.
I could see people getting a little bit wigged out by something like that. That would be, I'm pretty open-minded, and I've had phenomenal, extraterrestrial contact. Not that it all was like, for what I can remember, it's pretty good, But I have to say, I think something like that would definitely unnerve me.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what happened to a lady named Sandra.
Okay.
This is one of my favorite cases in the book. And I say that about every chapter, but I'm going to say it. But yeah, I adore Sandra. She reached out to me, and she was 8 years old in 1947 and living in Albuquerque, and had some really unusual experiences as a kid. Like once her mom came up when she was just a little baby, and she was floating above the crib, just floating there.
Wow.
And her mom's like, what's that for doing this? Put her down. And she just kind of floated gently down. Has a really good memory, almost eidetic memory. So she remembers stuff going way, way back.
Wow.
And a lot of paranormal experiences. Like she was in China because her dad worked in the military, and she was staying with some nuns, and they would put fresh cut flowers in every room. And the flowers that were in her room would last so long, like a full month. All the others would die in like 3-4 days.
Wow.
The nuns were freaking out because she was also having remote viewing and knew all this stuff that a little girl should not know. They wanted her to become a nun. Her mom's like, it's up to her. And Sandra's like, no, I don't want to do that.
Wow.
Anyway, I'm getting distracted. So Sandra is, she's 8 years old, and she decides she's going to go bike to her friend's house, which is a mile away on a Native American reservation. And this is way back in 1947.
Right.
Summer of 1947 in New Mexico, by the way.
Right.
She wonders if her father was somehow involved in Roswell. Because he was
Oh,
very highly placed, and they got called there.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think probably there was something going on there, which might speak
Yes.
to what happened to her.
Right.
So she's biking down this lonely highway. This is
Sounds
in
like
the
a
morning.
song coming up.
Yeah, hey. So anyway, she sees this shadow come over her head, and she's like, "What's that?" And this craft drops down on the road, kind of your typical saucer, metallic gray,
Hmm.
and a little door opens up, and she's looking at it and thinking, "Okay, this is weird." And in the doorway is a mantid, about 5 or 6 feet tall, wearing a kind of a gown or a dress, sort of. And it's waving to her, come here, come here. And she walks up to it thinking, well, this is interesting. This looks like a bug. And then she gets real close.
What a brave child, honestly.
Yeah, it kind of surprised me. But she's like, I didn't know. And that's
Right.
what I love about little kids is the fear doesn't usually start with the little childhood
Right.
encounters. It ramps up when you're an adult.
Well, 1947, you wouldn't have been watching, they didn't have the type of films that we have now that could scare the bejesus out of an adult, let alone a child. So they
Yeah.
do go in very innocently, right?
Well, she'd never seen TV. She didn't have a TV at that time.
Yeah. See, there we go. Yeah. So it's
So
like,
this mantid says, "I'm your mother. You can call me your mother." And I thought, oh, okay. And she's like, well, that's interesting.
right.
And she goes on board. It's right down on the ground. It's a small little craft. It goes from one end of the road to the other, but it's not that big. But inside, it's huge, much bigger than it looked on the outside. And all these little kids come running up to her, and she's looking at them like, well, they're bald. They've got large heads, dark eyes, white skin.
Right.
Oh, in hindsight, she realized they were grays. And it took her a little bit to realize that these weren't human. But they all came running up, and they wanted to feel her hair. She had long blonde hair. And she said they were kind of chirping and chirruping and just almost giggling and playful.
Right.
And were leading her around the craft. And they took her. Yeah, it was really interesting. So she gave this description you often hear: rounded room, indirect lighting, very clean, extremely sparse in terms of furniture, panels, or equipment. Really nothing in there that she saw. But they took her to this porthole so she could look out. And she got a huge shock because she's in there about a minute. And looking out the porthole, she's expecting to see, of course, the highway.
Right.
But no, it was a star field. Just stars everywhere.
Right.
And she realized that they're in outer space at this point. So that thrilled her. She's like, wow, this is amazing. And here, this is where I want to bring up
a picture,
because she actually drew it for me. And I have it here. Here it is.
All righty. Perfect.
It'll take me a second, but I think it will be worth it. So she is, they now lead her to the reason, I think, of this whole encounter. They take her to the center of the craft and show her this little device, which she says looks kind of like a TV in hindsight. And it starts playing this hologram. And let me see if I can pull up this picture.
Perfect.
Here we are.
Wow.
Here's the drawing she did.
Right.
And they showed her this little, you can see it right here in the center.
Go ahead.
Towards the left.
Right.
And
you can go over it.
This hologram, or a hologram comes out of it. She says it was absolutely lifelike, but only about maybe 2 feet in diameter. And it starts playing scenes of war, tanks and soldiers fighting each other and explosions and just battles. And
a sign of things to come.
Yep. And that's what they told her. They said, these things are in your future. You need to tell everyone that this is the wrong pathway, that war is not good, that it will lead to destruction and bad things. And she's thinking, well, I'm 8 years old. Why are you telling me this?
Yeah. We got to start young, though, right? I mean, mold, work with the young. Because that's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
For
Well, people always ask me that, like, why would they tell a little girl? Why a housewife? Why some mechanic or something? I'm like, because the government people aren't listening. They did go to the governments, and they didn't want to hear it. They reacted wrongly.
Right.
So they're doing, I think, what amounts to a grass movement. And this is, honestly, it's one of the most common things that people will get in terms of messages.
Right. So I find it interesting how, they will give you a lot of messages. And I just think that, I don't know, is it that people are so fearful that they're just not retaining it? I mean, how many people just don't remember the whole experience, let alone messages?
Exactly. Well, that does come up, and people will kind of subconsciously remember and start having dreams or become environmentalists or scientists or quantum physicists, or I mean, it bleeds through even if you don't remember.
Right. They lead the path, right?
She did remember, and she learned not to tell people. She tried.
Right.
I asked her, because what happened after next thing she remembers is she's waking up in the bathroom at her house. And she walks out kind of in a daze, and her parents are like, "Are you all right? Do we need to go to the doctor?" And she's like, "No, I'm fine." I said, "Where were you? You were missing for 3 hours." She never arrived at her friend's house. So they went down the highway and back and down the highway again 3 or 4 times, and finally found her right there by the side of the road, where they had, of course, checked a number of times.
I would have lost my mind.
Yeah.
Really?
Her mother was not
happy. As a parent. Yeah. So how did she, did she say how her parents reacted? Like, I'm just wondering if could this be a generational thing? Like, for her to be 8 years old and saying, "Oh, hey, this happened to me," especially when you're saying like this big, giant bug-like being is sitting there communicating with you saying, "I'm your mother." Like, how, how did mom and dad actually deal with that? Was this nurtured in her, or,
No, it wasn't. In fact, she kept it secret. I'm like, "You didn't tell them?" She said, "No, are you kidding? They would not have believed me. Not in a million years." I'm like, "Well, okay."
Not then. Yeah.
But she did hint around, like, "What do you think about UFOs and ETs later?"
Right.
And her dad said that he had seen one while in the Navy. One had was a UFO pacing their ship.
Right.
Her mom, no. But her grandmother said that, yes, she was visited by beings when she was a little girl. So, yeah, definitely generational. And I do see that in a number of the cases in this book.
Right.
One in a really dramatic way. But yeah, she ended up, of course, growing up to an adult and having many encounters. And with grays, which would come in and be very playful and give her messages, which she usually never remembered. One she did.
Right.
They told her, "You're going to live a long time." And she thought, "Well, that's nice."
Yes.
Which, of course, she has, because, she was, 8 in 1945. So
right.
You can do the math.
Yes.
And, just a lovely lady. And she said the Greys would come in and actually play music and dance around. I'm like, "You got to be kidding me."
That would be fun. Mine just sits there and stares at me. What is that?
Right?
Because
I've only heard that. And I asked Dolly about that. And she's like, "Oh, yeah." Because she heard music when she had a craft coming down, and they play music on board. But boy, I had rarely heard that.
That might actually make a bit of sense. I often, out of the blue, will just hear music. Just, crazy stuff. Like sometimes just like chanting, or like Gregorian chants, or just like what we would think of as, Viking or something very Celtic, or it varies. It's always very different flutes, or, pan flute, or violins, or like just piano. It's just different types of music. Wow. And then you'll go, this house will be quiet for weeks and weeks, and all of a sudden you'll get 2 nights of just chaos. And I say chaos, it's just music. And I'm laying there going, what am I listening to? So I wonder.
Yeah. I wonder about that too. I interviewed a lady who is like, "What is that rap music?"
Oh, it's that kind of music. definitely not mine.
It doesn't sound like rap music. It's drums and kind of hollering. And turned out she was at a Native American
ritualistic, like
in the past.
Right.
It was ghostly music that she was hearing.
See, I've heard that kind of stuff. That's like, well, see, learn something new every day, Preston. You just got my attention, my mind going, what was this you were really listening to? So that's interesting. That is actually very interesting.
Yeah, I think if something is really got a lot of emotion behind it, it can create sort of a echo through time, or just kind of becomes a part of the vibration of that area.
Yes.
And people, if you're psychic at all, you can sense it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sometimes it's very emotional.
Like, the office that I worked in years ago, occasionally I would work alone at night because we had a lot of backlog. And I'd be like, darn it, I hear voices. Who is that talking to? I'd stop and you could just not quite make out what they were saying.
Yes.
And I'd rush to the other room. Of course, it wouldn't be there.
Right.
So I started asking everyone. I'm like, and one lady saw a full color apparition. It was haunting the ladies' bathroom. It would follow people into the bathroom. It was a really rude ghost.
Well, we've had a couple of those. Yeah.
Not right.
Yeah. Wow.
One lady saw it in the reflection of the mirror, and mirrors can kind of reflect ghostly images where it doesn't happen in real life.
It's believed that mirrors, even mirrors facing each other can create portals because of reflection and such.
For sure, because I've done a lot of ghost research, and I've heard that at least a half dozen times where people can see a ghost in the mirror, they turn around and they don't see it.
Yes.
That is strange.
That's kind of wiki for sure, but it's very interesting to me about the music because it hits you to the core. It's very emotional. I've had some that have just brought me to the brink of tears. It's just so powerful, and it hits you to the core. So very interesting, because then after that, it's like goes all quiet and you're just like, bring it back, It's like whatever the case may be. A lot of comments and questions, of course, and are mantids thought to be true ET with Greys as their minions? I don't know.
I wouldn't call them minions, but
they
do.
Compadres
seen together, like as was true in Sandra's case, and it does seem like sometimes they are maybe not the bosses, but sort of in some ways, I guess, in charge or ordering people around. They're really smart. They're super, super intelligent, very advanced. They've said, we're the watchers. We're watching over you. We're taking care of you.
Right.
I've got healing cases from mantids, by the way. So I know people are scared of them. And some people say, this was a negative encounter. But I don't get a lot of negative encounters. I'm like, I wonder why people are. Because I don't not choose them. You know what I mean?
Right.
If someone has an encounter, I would absolutely love to talk to you, whether no matter what happened.
Right.
I do get negative cases for sure, but they're more of a mixed bag with some good and some that's just really scary for them. And one guy from England, Gary, I call him, and I put a chapter in a previous book called Gary versus the Greys because he's not happy with it.
Wow.
And they stopped being able to paralyze him. He reached out and smacked one right in the face. Yeah.
I'm
the
sure
Gray
that
was not happy.
No.
Really wide and hissed at him and knocked him right out.
Okay. So Gray's hiss. That is also very interesting.
Yeah. It hissed at him like a cat,
I have to say, you're welcome, Tools. I would have to say hissing. I've heard lots of hissing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wonder if I'm just like aggravated. Well, I'm one of those. No, I have a headache. Go away. Too tired. Wait till I'm sleeping.
They do
say
talk.
things like that.
There was one lady I interviewed. I have never published her account because it's super, super high strange. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Right. I mean, she saw a cat-like being, and it wasn't until I talked to Dahlia that I'm like, okay, there are cat-like beings.
Right.
So I kept putting hers on the back burner. But she said the Greys would come and talk to her verbally.
Right.
And she couldn't understand it, but it was a very high-pitched chirping kind of voice, which is...
I've heard chirping.
Yeah, that's what Sandra said too. So I'm like, okay.
Yep. So what's chirping? Who chirps? Don't tell me it's a big mantis. It might be. I might be sleeping tonight. I'm pretty easygoing, yeah, but they're wiggy looking, and I shouldn't judge a book by its cover if they're very benevolent. But it would be it's a bit unnerving when anything just shows up unexpectedly and just sits there and stares at you. So I'm not quite sure I'd feel about something that's 15 feet and crouched over because my ceiling's maybe only 10.
Yeah, well, that's the number one complaint. Them showing up without an announcement in your bedroom, the loss of control.
Yeah.
People also complain about the exam. They don't like that.
No.
People also say, especially when it involves other family members, their children,
right,
that can get people really upset. So that's pretty much the worst I hear.
Right.
I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've done the paralyzing thing. Not that I haven't experienced this, because I do have memories of it, but on an average. But I could see, the whole sleep paralysis thing, which can be linked to, again, the paranormal, the Hag syndrome, and of course, there's a lot of logical things as well, but of course, very linked to a lot of the ET race, the whole experience. So I guess we can sort of getting into that high strangeness area again. Just put up some comments here. Feel free to put up comments from your page, Preston, because your people. We are streaming for your listeners as well. So extraterrestrial aliens, witches are known to be disguised as black cats, or familiars. Yeah, I love it. And another question here. Hold on. Where are we? Blah, 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 blah. One was somebody was asking, and I'm sorry, I am just trying to. Here we are. Okay. What is any idea what the lifespan is for these praying mantis, extraterrestrials? Any idea?
Gosh, I have no idea. I have pretty much zero reporting on that.
Right.
I've talked to Dolly about the grays, and she's like, 700, 800, 900 is not unusual.
Right.
And that's echoed in a number of accounts for grays.
Right.
But I don't know about the mantids. I think that they're not quite as common.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably a lot of people don't talk about it. Mm-hmm. So that's another reason.
Right.
But I'm guessing longer than us.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I really couldn't tell you. I'm great. I'm going to have to look that up. That's another. Every time you think you know something, you realize you know nothing.
No, it's true. And Paul Heller said he was aware of 4 different ET species. That was one of the former Canadian defense minister. At one point, I thought he mentioned well over 100, like 150, 160 that were documented, but doesn't mean that they were necessarily here, which brings you to another question. Then how do you know? Right. Yeah,
exactly.
Paul Hillier.
I met Paul Hillier once, by the way.
Oh, yeah. He's just delightful for the most part.
Really nice guy. I bought his book. He really wanted to do his part for disclosure. Yeah. He knew stuff.
Yes.
And, I think there's probably a lot more types of ETs. Dolly always says, they're not really different species. They are all basically humanoid.
Right.
And the more I dig into this subject, I think, she's probably right. But it'd be a mistake to label these. We love division and labels here on Earth. And the message people get, the contactees especially, is we are you, you are us. I kind of am repetitive about that, but it keeps coming up.
I've recorded that. I've heard that, and it came through, and I have it in a recording. I said, who am I speaking to? We are you, you are us, we are one. That came on a recording, and I'm just like, that's freaking deep. I know.
That's the exact message. It's almost that same wording. So
it's fantastic. I think if you can keep an open mind, and it's hard sometimes, I think for people who are like all this talk about disclosure, we'll just slip away from, a quick moment. I feel like we're cycling back like from 2 years ago, but we're still evolving, I think, with the whole topic. And I think people are becoming more open to it. Like you seem to have like an endless supply of people who bring you their stories, and I know why it is, because there are a lot of people who write books, and yes, you know, I'm just being biased, and maybe I am, but no, but anyway, no, seriously, you're very, very open and kind, and I think people feel very comfortable and they trust you when they're giving you a story. Yes,
Yeah.
Chris, because Preston's really an ET.
I was in a past life, I think. I've got
Yeah.
memories.
Right.
I'm just saying.
I
That's
know,
what
right?
Bashar told me. I went to Daryl, what's his name? Daryl Anka? Who
Yeah.
channels Bashar. He pointed me out and gave me readings. Like,
Yes.
you were an ET in a past life. I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow.
And
That's
he didn't, I was not at all. I don't think I'd written one book at that point.
Really?
So he just kind of pulled me out of the audience and said, you.
Right.
Says,
Right.
I see UFOs above your head. You are here to anchor the ET energy.
Right.
Like, oh, okay. Because I was getting into it.
Right. Right. I love it though. I love it because I mean, obviously, it's set you on your path to where you are now. And for those who don't know, because we have Chris asking about Preston and Dolly, Preston wrote Symmetry, which is in fact Dolly's story, which I have here on the bookshelf, and we've talked about this extensively. You know, there should be a part 2.
There will be, yeah.
I know.
I know.
I love it.
That's what, like 60 years of experiences.
Yes.
And I was actually kind of trying to do the math on it. That's literally years with the
It
ETs.
is. It
years
is.
with them. So
yeah,
just try to wrap your head around that.
it is. It's a lifetime, you know. But again, it's just like how many people have lifetime contact. Much different situation, of course. You know, Dolly's very unique, as we know. We love her for it. But we have, you know, people who are lifelong contactees and who never have the benefit of remembering. So I think it's great when people have recollections and come to you to pretty much timestamp their experience because you're putting it in writing.
Well, most people I talk to don't end up in my books, just so you know.
Wow,
They're
really?
just looking for, someone to talk to.
Right.
They have some questions. They're looking for confirmation.
Right.
Have you ever had anyone tell you this?
Right. Right.
This sort of thing. I'm like, help me.
Yeah.
What the heck is going on with me? Can you help?
Right.
I do what I can.
Right.
But every now and then, if they've got a really good story, I'd be like, how would you feel about being interviewed? I would really think that people could benefit from what you're telling me, because a lot of people are going through this. It's a lot more people, Michelle, than the general public for sure realizes.
Really?
It's millions upon millions of people.
It completely fascinates me because I think it takes something to trigger it. For those who don't remember, I imagine there are people now, because we do live in a time where, shows like yours and like mine and shows, movies, people actually think this looks familiar. Why does this resonate with me? And they start researching a little bit, or they open their minds up, at least. For me, it was I start everything I know now after, because I'm aware now of what has been happening, and all of these paranormal experiences I was having throughout my life. I now realize, because of the connections, I'm kind of like, okay, you know what? I don't think it was just paranormal at all, actually. Holy crap, when you realize that and you have that holy wow moment, and then you start opening. It still took me as an adult, as I'm still unnerved, like I don't like things just showing up.
Yeah,
Now,
I get it.
well, I know, right? Like
I understand.
probably a majority of the population is probably thinking, yeah, no, I'm not good with that. Now I'm just brazen about it, And again, it's like Dolly said, just tell them, okay? No, I have a headache. I don't want to. Sounds like it's a bad, relationship or
in a
something.
way, paranormal
like,
doesn't exist. There's no such thing as supernatural paranormal. It is what it is. It's not breaking the laws of the universe.
Right.
Because we don't understand it.
Yes.
So it takes, and it's not at all unusual for people to take years to sort of come to grips with it.
Yes.
And here is a good case from the book that illustrates that.
Take her away.
This is the first chapter, and I thought, this is a good one to start with, because this is a gentleman who did allow me to use his real name. It's a multiple witness case. He and his mother. His name is Richard. And do I have that right? Yeah, Richard Simon.
Wow.
And he, at age 7, suddenly couldn't sleep through the night. Just couldn't do it. He had insomnia, and it was bad.
Right.
And some anxiety over it, of intruders and people looking at him and watching him. And he had no clue all the way up to about age 22 or so, 21. And what happened was his mom, Ines, who I interviewed as well, wanted to quit smoking. And she's like, I'm going to go to a hypnotherapist. Do you want to come, Richard? And we can deal with your insomnia. He's like, no, there's no way I'm going to a hypnotherapist. Those guys get into your brain and do things. And she's like, no, this is a legit lady. Her name is Aretha. And I looked her up. She's absolutely legitimate. Her full name is in the book, but I do remember her first name is Aretha. So Ines and Richard go to the hypnotherapist, and he's waiting in the office while she goes in to quit smoking, quote. Because that's not what happened. He's listening through the wall and hears his mom crying pretty badly. So for about an hour almost. Finally, she comes out and she's drying her tears. And she's like, what's wrong? What happened? And she just kind of waves him away. It's like, it's your turn. We'll talk about it afterwards. Go in. It's your turn.
Right.
And he's like, okay, what's going on? She just wanted to quit smoking. Why is she crying? So he goes in. And of course he asks, what about my mom? And the Aretha's like, you know what? Let's not deal with that now. Let's deal with you. You have a problem sleeping, right? He's like, yeah, I have since age 7. And she asked him why. Do you have child abuse? Anything traumatic? He's like, no, I have loving parents. I've got great friends. I've got a good life. There's no reason I just can't sleep. Right. And it started at age 7. And so she puts him in a trance. He says it took almost a half hour. And then asked him, like, what is the reason that you can't sleep? What is the reason behind your insomnia? And as soon as she said that, in his mind's eye, he sees this bright light shining down on him. And then what we now would call grays looking down at him. Right. And then the dam broke, and he just remembered the whole thing. At age 7, he wakes up, and the house is flooding with light. So he's like, that's strange. And he decides he's going to go into his mom's room. His dad's at work, and his mom's not in bed. He's like, Mom, where are you? Mom, and cannot find her. And then he sees a figure walking by the window that's a little short and not quite right. So he's standing there by the doorway when the front doors fly open, and he sees grays. Next thing he knows, he's on board, presumably. He's describing being in this room that's metallic, rounded walls, indirect lighting, all the things we hear. And on this table, undressed, and there's a very tall gray who seems to be in charge, almost 7 or 8 feet, a mid-sized one, which is about 5 or 6 feet, and a bunch of the little guys, probably what we would call AI grays. Right. And he can't move. And he's basically screaming, thinking these are monsters. They're going to eat me. This was not a good experience for him. And they're operating on his stomach, which he thought was, kind of unpleasant. It didn't hurt. He was kind of cold. But finally, one of the grays comes up and says, what's the matter, child? And he said, I'm scared. I want to go home. And they said, well, we'll be done soon. And of course, he would start crying again, and the gray would come up. What's the matter, child? Like, really, what do you think is the matter?
It's like a replay. What's your problem? Yeah. Wow.
And at some point, he hears this lady screaming bloody murder in the other room, letting out a string of very foul language. And if you hurt my son, you MFers, I am going to kill every last one of you. And just going off. And the taller gray points to the little guys, go in there and handle her. And he's thinking, at least there's some adult here who's going to rescue me. And this went on for a good 20 minutes or half an hour. He could smell the air. It had a kind of a clammy fish tank smell, he said. Mm. And next thing he knows, he's waking up in bed with no memory of the experience. But it was funny because, well, not funny, it's weird, I guess, or traumatic. Right. As he's recalling this, and the Greys come through the door, he flies off the hypnotist's couch, fully awake, and he runs up to Retha and says, "You did this to me. You put these thoughts in my head. This is your fault. This never happened. How dare you?" And she's like, "Calm down. I didn't put a single thing in your head. I didn't say a word. It's under recording. You will have the recording. And this did happen because your mom remembered the same exact thing." Took her a while to calm him down, but he apologized.
So what were they fixing on his stomach then? What was was he having health problems, obviously?
Not at that time, but years later, they found this tumor in there.
Okay.
Which they were like, we don't understand why this isn't cancerous. This should be cancerous. It's been there a very, very long time. It's wrapped around your intestines.
Oh, wow.
He connects it somehow to that. And he's like, I don't think these guys are evil or trying to hurt me. In fact, one of them was quite nurturing. And he could.
Which is interesting because you hear that they tend to be very, even keel, not emotional.
Yeah, the little short ones were just doing their job.
Right.
And the one in the background was just overseeing, but the one that was talking to him was very nurturing. He said it had a beautiful, handsome male voice that instantly calmed him down.
Right.
So of course, this didn't stop his insomnia.
Right. Well, I guess not.
Unfortunate, but Retha told him, "You're going to start remembering other stuff." And he did. He remembered being on board and watching the ship go through space and all this stuff.
Right.
But here's to me because this is a lifelong thing, right?
Yes.
He's had missing time. He got married. He had kids. And his daughter was 7 years old. And he's watching TV. He's watching Ancient Aliens or something.
Shocker. For a guy who can't sleep. Yeah.
He wants to learn about the Greys. And his daughter's like, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And he's like, "Not now. I'm watching TV." And she's like, "No, it's important." She had dropped her Barbies and was pulling on him. And finally the commercial comes on. And he's like, "What? What, honey?" And she points to the TV and the Grey comes back on. She's like, "That's the thing that went into my room and poked my nose." Because she was having these severe nosebleeds.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
So, and when his mother, Ines, got hypnotized, their stories jibed completely. She's like, "Honey, when I was 7, I saw an ET in the barn where I lived."
Right.
So there's 3 generations there, all at age 7. And wait, here's where it just gets even stranger. So they take the daughter to the dentist. And the dentist is like, "Well, you're supposed to tell us if your daughter has implants and has she had surgery?" He's like, "What are you talking about? She's never had surgery. She's 7. And he says, "Well, there's an implant in her nasal cavity, her sinus cavity." And he's like, "Well, let me see the x-rays." And you could see it. It was this little cylinder with little filaments. It was embedded in the tissue. And the doctor's saying, "Well, she must have stuck something up there." He's like, "How? How that deep? How is it buried in there?" He's like, "Well, don't worry about it." He's like, "Don't worry about it? Are you kidding?"
He says, you just finished telling me there's something up her nose.
So he goes to a doctor, and the other doctor says, "Don't worry about it." He's like, shouldn't we have surgery? This shouldn't be there. And he's like, "I wouldn't worry about it." So he goes to another doctor. He's upset. Same thing. Doctor's like, "I wouldn't worry about it." He's like, "Well, I'm going to go to another doctor." He's like, "Fine." So he goes to, I think this is the 4th doctor, and gets an incredible shock because this doctor is listening, and he's thinking, "Well, I'm going to be called a UFO nut again." But the doctor sits down, closes the door, and says, "If you tell anyone this, I'm going to deny it." Pulls open the drawer, takes out a document, and slides it across the desk. And it's from the federal government. And it says to the doctor, "If you find an implant of unknown origin, you are not to remove it. You are not to mention it or take any action. And if you do so, you can lose your license and worse.
Wow.
And the doctor says, all doctors get these. I've never heard this before, though I have to tell you, I've had patients go to doctors and have the same struggle with the doctor who seems to like not want to talk about the implant or ignores it, or
but they want to tell you it's there. And like, how did this get here? What is this? But no, it's all fine. It's fine.
One doctor doctored the x-rays for a guy I talked to. Craig is his name. He had, he would set off metal detectors and stuff and had the x-ray. And then it's like, I want my x-ray. And he got it. And it was doctored. It had been altered.
Wow.
So yeah, there's something going on there. And the end note to this story is crazy because his daughter, who was 7, is of course now grown up.
Right.
Had a kid who's 7 years old, and it's like, Mommy, the monkey man is looking at me through the window. And she's like, The monkey man? Well, he doesn't have any hair. He's got gray skin and big dark eyes, and he came to the foot of my bed. So that's 4 generations where all of them had encounters starting exactly at the same age, 7.
Wow, it's wild. That seems to be the magic age. I have to ask you about implants. So, do ATs put implants in, or would that be considered, the big M word?
Well, my labs, you mean?
Sure, let's go with that. Yeah, you said it.
ETs do implant people, and implants can come from human agents as well, let's put it that way, which is nefarious. And those would probably be used for mind control and tracking, which has always been the speculation that that's what implants are for from ETs. I'm like, I'm not so sure of that, because very early on, one of my first real cases, the lady's like on board and they're putting some in her, and she's like, what are you doing? I said, we're putting in an implant. She says, what is it for? And they said, it's to measure the levels of pollution in your body. You guys have a lot of pollution in your body. We're measuring it. And I started doing research onto this because there was so much speculation and fear-based speculation. It's, speculate all you want, but if you are going to say that this is what the implant is for, where's your evidence? And I can tell you that I have multiple first-hand cases where people have been told by the ETs that it's to measure the levels of pollution, it's to measure your vital signs, it is to monitor your vital signs, boost your immune system. It's something health related, as far as I can tell. And I had another case that just spoke to that in full 5 stars, because this lady sneezed out an implant and she started to get real sick and had this hypoglycemic disorder that the doctors could not diagnose, but was losing weight and fainting 5 times a day, had to carry around orange juice and a peanut butter sandwich and just to stay conscious. And the doctors were feeding her all these vitamins and doing everything they could, but it was getting serious. And then she's pulled into what appears she thinks might be an underground base. She says, I honestly can't be sure, but it was like a stadium. And there was all these partitions, like cubicles. There was what looked like carpet on the ground. And she's lying in one of these cubicles. There's a guy right next to her, and he's wearing a flannel shirt. He's like, my name's Cooper. What's yours? And I won't use her real name. I call her Jill. And she's like, I'm Jill. Where are we? He's like, I don't know. They're very dazed. And coming down the corridor is this 9 feet tall figure in a shiny black jumpsuit, a chin that juts down to here, an enormous forehead, huge eyes, but kind of human looking, very pale skin, orange spiky hair sticking straight up about 4 inches.
Wow.
She says it wasn't hair. This is the lady who called me saying, I just need to know if you've ever had a report of a ET like this. No, I haven't. I really haven't.
So you have no idea what race of what race he belongs to.
I don't know.
Yeah, just a humanoid. Wow.
But he takes his cape, wraps it around her, puts these bell-like instruments over her, like pancreas and various, all over her torso, and starts pulsing energy.
Right.
And she's not religious, but she starts saying the Lord's Prayer, and she's screaming and wakes up back in her house, runs to her husband, and can't wake him up. Can't wake up any of her children for about 20 minutes. Finally wakes them up. He's a mechanic. You know, they have no connection to government. She's a housewife.
Yeah, right.
I don't know why this is happening to me.
But do they live near any bases?
No.
Wow.
It's just in rural Nebraska.
Right, right.
So she, you know, she's explains what happened. They're very supportive.
Yeah.
And because she has had prior encounters. And she was sore. She was sore for a week. But she didn't faint that day. It took her till the end of the day where she realized, you know what? I don't think I fainted once, because she get vertigo and just fall right over. And
wow.
After a week, she started gaining back her weight. Wasn't fainting. She was healthy. She's like, Preston, they healed me. So I suspect she was re-implanted, because she was fine until she sneezed out that implant.
Right. Right. Yeah. So they were monitoring. Robert says, were there similar later occurrences?
No, that was a one-off. She did. Wow. She was taken on board, and they showed her a hybrid baby, and they're like, "This is yours," and she's like, "You got to be kidding me!" And she really wanted to love it.
There, surprise! Yeah, great.
And after she gets back, her little 2-year-old son's like, "Mommy, I went to the moon last night." She's like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, the moon came down. I went on the moon." And she's like, "Oh, you're just..." He's like, No. It came down. He's 2, so he can't really verbalize it. But
I love it.
Freaked her out because that was the encounter she had.
Right. Do you find that when you hear stories about, look, you have a child, because I've watched documentaries, and it's a mixed bowl of emotions. You know, you've got some people that are like, oh my goodness, like I was so surprised, and they take me back to spend time with my baby, and it's nice to see, you know, they explain, no, they're going to evolve here because they won't fit in, you know. It's just like, it's all stuff that makes sense. But then there have been people that just feel like, no, I did not know about this. I did not agree to this. Well, you don't remember that you agreed to it, whatever the case may be. But and I find that men tend to be worse because they feel like, you know, well, they stole my sperm and they did this and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if it's because men feel like it's that left-sided thinking, you know, like I'm the provider, I'm the protector, and this happened to me and I feel vulnerable. And, you know, I don't know, maybe that's what it is, but some people are okay. Other people are just, they're angry, or they just feel so vulnerable.
Yeah, well, I've certainly heard the whole bell curve of this. There was one guy in upstate New York, Ken was his name,
right,
who was having all kinds of missing time and didn't really remember anything, but there was a lot of missing time. And finally, he has this fully conscious encounter, and they're like, you need to know why you are being contacted. Here's your son.
Right.
Aren't you happy? And he felt revulsion, anger, and a nurturing feeling towards this child who was his, and wanted to hold it and hug it, but at the same time was a little bit grossed out and super angry because the Greys seemed like, oh, you know, aren't you happy? This is why we contacted you. You have no reason to fear us. We're not here to hurt you, is what they told him.
Right. I know. I love it. I do. I think, you know, there's things that we agree to, and because we don't remember it, doesn't mean we didn't agree to it. And that's where I think people, you know, I mean.
And they gave him this amazing ability to do psychic reading. They said, it's your job. You need to do this. And he would see a person and could hear them saying, go to that person. They need a reading.
Oh, wow.
He walked up to this lady on the street. He's like, oh, this, because they wouldn't leave him alone. Like, go to that lady. And he walks up to her and says, you need to go home right now. he's not knowing why he's saying this. He says, go home and see your husband right now. You need to go home. She's like, well, I was going out to see my friends. She's like, no. You need to go home. So years pass, and he's in the grocery store, and he's like, oh no, there's that lady in line. And he's looking the other way. And of course, she turns and sees him. She's like, oh, it's you. And she leaves her line and goes to his line. She's like, you're the man. You're the man who told me to go home. It's like, yeah, that's me. She's like, I want to thank you because I did go home. You were so vehement that I went home and I spent this lovely evening with my husband, and he died in his sleep that night.
Oh, wow.
That gives me chills every time I think of it.
Wow.
Yeah. She would never have been able to have that, that last night with him. And,
and let's face it, in this day and age, somebody comes up to you, is all adamant in your face about something like that, with even the best of intentions. I think we're in a day and age where most people be kind of like, or many people might be saying, okay, buddy, whatever, get out of my face. Like, you're nuts, go away. Like, maybe we should be listening more because you have these incredibly gifted people. I'm very friendly. So, if somebody came up to me and do that, I'd be trying to pry for more information.
Yeah, I'd be thrilled. I love getting a psychic reading.
Well, it's a reader in us, right? We want to know more. So
I find it interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an amazing ability. So it's kind of like a trade-off, We take your sperm, we'll give you a gift.
Yeah, well, that's what they've told people that flat out. This is our gift to you for having worked with us.
Wow.
So I think that there's truth to that. They will help you develop your abilities. That's one of their agendas. It's not the word I really like to use, but one of their goals is to wake us up.
Now, all races, or just some specific races?
All of them. Yeah.
So it's enlightenment and evolution.
Yeah, I get mostly mantids, human-looking, little blue guys, grays, tall grays, short grays, tall whites.
Right.
But that's mostly what I get, and strange humanoids.
Right.
Weird, strange humanoids.
Right. So, what's with the little blue people? Like what? Because I've never heard of this.
I am going to bring up the picture that I will bring up. Let me see where. Here.
Beautiful.
Okay. Because I've got this guy's picture.
Not that one. Big Kahuna comes through, goes, wow.
Let me see. And I will pull it up for you so I can tell you. This guy contacted me because he saw a picture that on one of my videos. And his name is Ron Johnson. Okay. Let me use his real name. And when he was a little boy, he and his little brother had these weird experiences where the room would fill with light. Just fill with light, and then in would walk this enormously tall being, probably a mantid. He couldn't quite tell because the room was so bright, and it would move off to the corner. And then in would come grays, 2 or 3, followed by these little blue beings, who I will show you here, because this is the picture that my sister-in-law drew. For what
I remember that one. Yeah.
This is that is exactly what we saw. That is it. So I'm like, oh, okay. He said they would have these little kind of wands, sort of like what you see in the picture, but a little different.
Right.
And they would, he would hear, "Don't be afraid. Everything's fine. You're not going to be hurt." Wrinkly. Yeah. So they were wrinkly, little eyes, wore a hood. He said that looks very much like it. Right. So when they saw what was it, Star Wars with the Jawas? Absolutely freaked them out because that's exactly really close to what they saw.
Right.
It went on for years. And here's high strangeness for you. And I love this because I was just emailed yesterday by another witness who's like, I should have told you this because that happened to me. Ron and his brother would wake up and they'd be wrapped up in their sheets like a burrito with their arms to their sides, and they couldn't move in the morning after one of these guys came in. They'd be like, Mom, help. And the mom would come running in like, what happened? How did you get in there? They're like, we didn't do it. It's the little blue guys. And she's like, stop talking about these little blue guys. It's your imagination. They were very religious.
Wow. Yeah.
And this is from that point, Ron's like, I wasn't religious because it wasn't fitting in. You'd go to church and you'd start telling, well, it's not like that. We actually came from Mars. Is what
wow.
they taught him. He kind of picked that up, even though he didn't. He only remembered once being on board. But yeah, they both wake up wrapped up like a burrito. And I'd heard that a couple of times. That lady who was healed, I told you about, the ET said, well, whenever you want us to come, just wrap up your blanket and put it at the bottom of the bed and we will come. And they would.
That's interesting that they would see that. So it's telepathy, I guess, with maybe while she's doing this, they're picking up on her thoughts, or are they just, do they have like a doorway right into her room? Oh, there it is. Okay. Like, how does that work?
I think they can see, probably psychically or even with instrumentation.
Right.
They watch over contactees extraordinarily closely. Closely enough to stop car accidents and falls and drownings and assault and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yes.
But
that's interesting. I've had little things happen, and that would make sense.
But one of the other witnesses in the book is like, I saw you mentioning that on a podcast. He's like, that happened to me. I woke up and I was completely wrapped up. I couldn't get out. I had to struggle. I'm like, well, dude, that was them. They do that. I think they're just being funny.
Right. Like, so they're having a great time and they're just messing with you.
like, why would they do that? It's crazy. I had another lady who woke up and she's like, couldn't get out of bed. And she's struggling. Her quilt had been wrapped up like a Tootsie Roll and tucked in on both sides and over her neck.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
So good thing she didn't struggle too hard.
Wow. That one was a little rude, but I think it's a calling card. I think they're doing it on purpose. I think they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's the way you're saying.
You're going to know now. Yeah. You don't believe it the first time? How about now? They're trying to kill me. I don't know. That wrap up the neck. Hey, Wayne has a question for you. Preston, good evening. What are your thoughts on moon-eyed people? There were mentions by the indigenous people of the American Eastern and Mid-Eastern states. Eastern and Mid-Eastern states. And they would call them moon-eyed people.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. I don't know that I've heard that term.
Huh.
But I've certainly... the gentleman, Ron Johnson, is, I think, half Native American. Mm-hmm. And the people I've talked to, Dolly has Native American in her. Other witnesses in the book do as well. Substantial amount. Mm-hmm. It does seem to be a contributing factor, I'm guessing, but it keeps turning up. Because it is all about genetics. And if you talk to the Native Americans, one guy I interviewed, Stan Hughes, was a full-blooded Seneca Indian. He's like, call me an Indian, don't call me a Native American. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
That's fine. That's what you want. But yeah, he had extraordinarily interactive and benevolent encounters. And it seems like the Native Americans have a much closer relationship to that. And actually, there's oral traditions in numerous Native American cultures, and for that matter, indigenous cultures throughout the world, that say flat out, we descend from ETs. The star people is what they call them. So I think that, I'm not sure that answers the question. But.
He says, I was just curious if they themselves were indigenous, or were they another form of ET?
Hard to say. I think, honestly, we are dealing with extraterrestrials in most of these cases, but I'm not going to say that in every case, because I did talk to a guy who's like, no, I saw an elf. It was an elf.
Right. It was. I think I have, okay, hold on, because there's a two-part one for you here, and then we'll get back to another story. I recently spoke with someone who saw tall whites. He claims extraterrestrials have ambassadors who visit Earth, and the men in black take them around visiting various places around the world. Have you, I'm just looking for part two. Oh, do you know anything about this? That's part two.
I can't say that I have an account like that. I've read some stuff along those lines. I can't say I've really looked into anything like that, but
right.
I can't really.
Dolly puts it out there, misinformation. There we go.
All right. Well, maybe that's why I haven't heard of it. Because I have talked to hundreds of people.
Right.
And someone says, this happened to me. I'm like, okay, let's sit down, let's dig in.
Yeah.
And I am surprised pretty much every time I interview someone, but 80% of it, no. They'd be like, you're not going to believe this, but this is what happened, because I ask them, like, how big was the room? Some people will give me this look like, oh no, I can't say this. I'm like, tell me. I said, well, the room changed size when I was in there. I'm like, oh, okay. Right. I have heard that. I've absolutely heard that. Now, or it's bigger on the inside than on the outside. And people are really reluctant to report the high strangeness, which is why what I think is so special about this book is because I'm trying to bring it out. This is the truth of contact. It does force a lot of people to think outside of the box. So I have some people who are like super religious and they're not so religious anymore.
Right.
Oh, thanks, Raul. That's very kind of you. Very cool.
There we go. I'm just trying to get to the stuff that I had started. Here we go. There's another one. So,
yay.
In a case of psychic awareness in military families.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There is a weird military connection with a lot of this. When I was interviewing Dolly, I asked her about this. She's like, well, yeah, my dad is in the military. There was another lady in Maine. She's like, yeah, my dad's in military intelligence. Sandra, whose case I told you about. She's like, yeah, my dad was in military intelligence. There does seem to be sometimes a connection there. And ETs are contacting people who have a real strong psychic awareness. This is the kind of genetics they love.
Right.
Because we know from studies of psychic abilities that this is inherited often. Yes. There was one lady who could levitate halfway. She could reduce her body weight. And she says, I don't know how I do it. I just do it kind of by willpower. But my dad had the same ability. And I saw that, I wrote about human levitation. Well, we did a show on it, on human levitation. That is inherited in a bunch of levitation cases. So I think, yes, I would say their contactees are psychic. And a lot of contactee families do have military in them. But I'm on the fence about it because, shoot, who doesn't have a military person in their family?
It's true.
If
you're not wrong.
You have a big family at some point, your grandfather or an uncle or a nephew. I've got a nephew who is in the military, and my grandfather, who I never met, was a general actually. And there was generations of it. Right.
Well, they're in there. I mean, I've had, 2 grandfathers that were in the military. Uncle was in the Air Force, or, great uncle rather, So it's just, it all ties in. We all know someone who's there, right? Preston, are you psychic at all because of your experiences?
I'm going to say that that's a good possibility. At age 9, I had this amazing psychic experience, which was so funny to me because I just knew all the answers to this game show, Treasure Hunt.
Right.
I was watching it with my sister. We're just little kids. I'm like, that lady in the audience, that black lady, they're going to pick her. And they did. And Victoria looked at me like, how did you know that? I'm like, I have no idea.
Right.
I'm like, that canister has the flowers in it. And I was right, of course. And, it just went down the line. And there's 70 or 80 boxes, and one has a $50,000 check. And I'm like, it's number 73. Or some number. And, of course, it was. And we just rolled on the floor. And that was it for years. So after my mom died, I did see her spirit. And I started having lucid dreams where she'd come and visit me. And found out my brother, my mom died in 84. I'm having these lucid dreams in 86. In 86, I found out that my brother had seen a UFO. So I lose my mind. I go absolutely crazy. And I'm like, okay, UFOs are real.
Right.
And I start having out-of-body experiences at the same time.
Yeah.
Ramping up huge. And psychic experiences came like an avalanche on me. of telepathy and clairvoyance and precognition mostly. Telepathy, did I say that?
Yes. That's okay.
Just weird
Right.
stuff. And
Right.
looking back in my childhood, there's a few instances where I think I probably did have contact. So yeah, I'm going to say it does come hand in hand.
Right. Right. I love that. I love that. I have to make a quick, sponsor and station ID for anyone just tuning in right now. You're listening to The Outer Realm, and I am Michelle DeRoche. Our special guest tonight is my dear friend Preston Dennett. He's talking about his latest book, Humanoids and High Strangeness, 20 True UFO Encounters. And we are broadcasting live on United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey since the beginning. So thank you, Folgers. It definitely would not be the same without you. Also, big thank you to Justin Snicker, a.k.a. Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, who is an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music streaming platforms. He is the voice and the music of our intro and our outro. So big thank you to him. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind our banners and logos here at The Outer Realm. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre and does great commission pieces, books, and all that fun stuff. So, back to it. I know. Just say that.
All right. Well, here, I'll give you a choice. Do you want to hear about the elf story or the demonic dwarf or a very scary gray encounter that ended up totally psychically enlightening this guy?
Oh, really? I don't know. They're all good. I want to go with the elf first, just because I'm curious about elves and fairies and things like that, because I just studied so much pagan and Celtic stuff, and then maybe we'll let's just try to do them all.
All right,
just go, Preston, go.
This guy contacted me. His name is Llewellyn Sharp, and there's his picture there. He's this lovely gentleman who contacted me. He's like, just want to know if you've ever had anyone with a story like this. And he wrote it down for me in a full-on manuscript, which was 7 or 8 pages or so, called My Mysterious Friend. And I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. No, I don't think I've heard of anything quite like this. What happened? Because I wanted to hear it again from his own mouth. And what an amazing story. He described how, as a little kid, he was in Englewood, Colorado. Let me see, I have the exact date right here with my notes. I think it was like 1940 something. At any rate, let's see. Yeah, 1945. He's 4 years old and has a great family. He has an older sibling and loving parents. And he's in the living room alone one day, and coming out of the bookcase is this 4 foot tall, 3 foot tall, little elf-like being. I'm like, what do you mean elf? And he says, well, it was dressed in human clothes. It had a short little jacket, gray trousers. It was bald. It had very large eyes, but they were normal human-looking eyes, and looked old. It was not a young thing. It was definitely an adult. It introduced itself, gave his name, which he won't tell me. He says it's private. I'm like, that's fine. But kind of joked around with him for a few minutes and then walked right through the wall. And he goes and runs and tells his mom, like, Mom, I saw an elf. And she's like, you have an imaginary friend, honey. He's like, oh, okay. Not really understanding what she's talking about. Wow. And I thought it was a one-off. It wasn't, Michelle. This thing came back like 6 times.
Wow.
And he knows it was physical because it would grab stuff and toss it to him. It never touched him. Not once did he actually touch it. But it would like bounce stuff on its head and goof around. And once sat down with him and said, there's a big world out there and there's all these things and a lot of spiritual stuff that went right over his head. He can't really remember it because he was 4. This went on till he was 5, and only when he was alone, usually in the mornings, once outside, and finally he had to move. So he's so upset. He's like, I hope my elf friends come before I move. I want to tell them to come with me. And they did. One time, 2 of them came. He says, I want to introduce you to my friend. Here's my. So he had 2 elf friends.
Wow.
These were human. They were human, but human looking, I should say.
Right.
But different. Not like a normal person, certainly.
Right. Right.
Hands and a nose, a round nose, lips.
That's amazing.
And he's like, I'm moving. Will you come with me? And they got solemn for the first time, because usually they're very happy and funny.
Yeah.
And they said, no, we cannot leave this location. We
Oh.
stay here.
Oh,
He was
that's
devastated. Yeah.
ah, yeah. So that was the end. So they just maybe belonged in that time and space.
Yeah. So I asked him, have you ever seen a UFO? And missing time? He's like, no, I've never had missing time. I did see a UFO with my wife as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this could have been a screen memory? Have you heard of screen memories? It's like, yes,
Right.
I have. And no, I've never been taken on board. I've never been physically examined. This wasn't scary. It wasn't a gray. And I did my research. And Michelle, I got a huge shock because I put this out, and I'm getting contacted by people. It's like, I'm so glad you put this out, because I saw a little elf too when I was a kid or an adult. I've got 10 new cases of elves.
I think that's just going to be like a book on its own if it keeps up.
I guess so.
It's a curiosity, because they're just like, I don't know. Are they terrestrial? Maybe. I mean,
think so, yeah.
Because Kat says, I wonder why they couldn't leave. Why could they not give up their space? Or why would they not give it up?
Yeah. Well, I suspect that they lived in that area.
Yeah.
They were bound. I don't want to say bound to it, but I couldn't tell you. They did not say.
Right.
But,
right.
I found a bunch of cases.
This is dimensional. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've talked to people who've seen fairies before, and I'm like, fairy, okay, right, sure you did. But after hearing it like 3 or 4 times, like, gosh, maybe this is real. Several of these are contactees.
Yeah. Wow.
I found a bunch of elf cases in Colorado in that area. Like, oh my God, this is insane. Upstate New York has a bunch. There's certain areas where it's wilderness.
You remote view, you can see things like fairies. You could see them, and that they're residing around. But it's very curious to me. I mean, I could see why they would show themselves to children because of the innocence, but to just you're taking a chance with adults because they're just little guys, Well, 4 feet.
Llewellyn ended up writing all these books about spirituality and enlightenment and consciousness, which were very well received. I mean, they did well.
Right.
So he's guessing that was an influence for sure.
Oh, wow. Wow. I think you should do a book just on that if you get enough stories, because it's a whole other thing altogether.
Yeah.
It's curiosity.
It's bending my brain a little bit because, I did look into the fairy lore of Ireland, but I thought this was something from the past that we've kind of grew out of.
Right.
But they went away because it's got to be so technological here. But nope, they're still here.
There are so many stories from ancient cultures about fairies and druids and pagans and how they were very, very active, in human life. And it wasn't until religion came into play where they started spinning things around to make it look like they were more of an enemy. And look, I mean, I read an article online that was in a newspaper in Iceland or Norway, and they were building a highway, and they came up with this huge ancient tree, and they were going to knock it down. And all these freaking gnomes went renegade and started causing all this crazy stuff to happen. So the highway split around this tree.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know. I'm not a fan of gnomes, but kudos to the gnomes for
Oh,
saving
wow.
the tree. So
That would be, I'd love to see that place. That would be really cool because you could point to that tree and say, hey, gnomes live here.
I know. But they put out there's little homes and everything to them. Like there's a whole lore about it. And people from certain areas, especially in the Icelandic areas, will tell you all kinds of stories of them.
Yeah,
So
one of the stories that the guy told me was he would set out food for it and it would be taken. It's like, I'm telling you, this is not being eaten by rats or anything.
Right. Yeah. I'd be like, So I don't know. It's fascinating. Okay, demon story next.
All right. This is a story about a demonic hairy dwarf. I don't know what the heck this is, honestly. But here, let me pull up this guy. This is the guy who contacted me from England, actually.
Okay.
And his name is Andy Daly. He heard me on a podcast. He says, I really want to tell my story. You can use my name.
Okay.
I think it's important people know that this sort of thing can happen. And he had an angelic encounter. He's had ET encounters and this weird a ghost encounter. He's got the whole lineup
gambit
of strangeness. But he's just a little boy, right? And in Warwickshire, England, and it's his birthday. He's 8 years old, and it's very, very early in the morning, so he couldn't sleep. He had new toys, and he's playing with his toys, and he is lonely a little bit, so he decides he's gonna go wait in his dad's room until his dad wakes up. Just go lie down next to him.
Right.
And so he does this. The door is already a little bit open. It's ajar to his dad's room. Goes, lays next to his dad, and had just laid down when he saw this shadow on the wall coming from the doorway. And it's a short little shadow. He's like, huh. And it's jiggling the doorknob, which is weird because the door is already open. You can just push it open.
Right.
And out steps this demonic, hairy little dwarf. I'm like, what do you mean? He said, well, it was covered from head to toe with hair. It had an aura of menacing about it. Dark, dark little eyes, fangs, real sharp teeth, and beady eyes that are staring right at him. I mean, it locked gazes with him, and it's kind of leering at him. And he's like, Dad, 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 but was too scared to scream. He was basically petrified.
Right.
And finally, he just closes his eyes, like, go away, go away, go away, and opens his eyes. It didn't go away. It's still standing there. It doesn't come up to the bed, doesn't do anything but stare at him. And he's like, it was real. I'm like, could this have been a dream? Maybe you fell asleep. He's like, no, I never fell asleep. I never woke up. I was fully conscious through the whole way. I saw the shadow on the wall. It was exactly this, just came up to the doorknob. And finally it creeps, after about a full minute, he thought he was going to die of fright.
Wow.
That's the kind of terror he had.
Right.
Creeps back, and the shadow's gone, and he hits his dad real hard because he's mad his dad hadn't woken up. He's like, Dad! And his dad says, you had a nightmare. He's like, no, I didn't. But his dad didn't know what to say. And neither did he. And we talked this through. Because he's like, could this have been an ET? I'm like, well, gosh, I don't know. This doesn't really fit the ETs. I mean, there are hairy dwarves, but they would normally come right up to you. Or, I don't know. It could be.
Right.
I don't think it's a spirit. And he's like, well, could it be a Bigfoot? And I'm like, in England?
Yeah, they've got them all over. Yeah, but he's not tall enough, though.
Right. I was like, so here's the end note to this. A couple of years later, he's digging through the attic and pulls out a book. And, of course, it's on Bigfoot. And he's flipping through it. And there's a picture, a drawing, I should say, of almost exactly what he saw.
Oh,
so maybe it was a baby Bigfoot.
Maybe, a youngster. Yeah.
I don't know how it got in the house, but they can do that. They're
curious.
Beings, which they can, like ETs. I've got cases of Bigfoot in people's bedrooms. No kidding.
Heck, why not? Especially if they come through portals and stuff. If they are. dimensional beings, which I believe they are. I know it is to start getting all the freaking possible hate mail, but it's true. I don't know, all the theories on that. It's all theory at this point, but there's, dimensional beings can use little portals, and y'all just start remote viewing. You might see some of this stuff. Just saying, But yeah, that's fascinating. It is a little bit. It's a little bit wiggy.
It's strange, and he ended up having an angelic encounter, which was kind of interesting, which changed his life. He had a son who was born premature and needed operations and wasn't likely to survive. And he prayed his heart out and had a spiritual awakening that completely changed his life. And he's trying to adjust to it when he was living in the hospital because he wouldn't leave his son's side. He sold his business. He basically moved out of his home and lived in the hospital to be with his son. And he got this spiritual awakening that he knew his son was going to live. But now his whole belief system shattered, right?
Yeah.
And in walks this nurse. And she says, "I'd like to pray with you. Is that okay?" She says, "I would like that." And they prayed for an hour, and he thought this was just the loveliest thing because the nurses were, while nice, hadn't really taken that extra step to do that before.
Right.
And he said, "Thank you." He says, "This is my gift to you," and gave him her Bible. And he said, "Thank you." And the next day, he's like, "Gosh, that nurse just went above and beyond. I need to get her some flowers."
Right.
Bought some flowers at the gift shop and goes to the nurse's station. He's like, "Who is that Asian-looking nurse? The really short Asian-looking nurse who came into my room."
Right.
And they looked at him like he's crazy. Like, we don't have any people like that in the entire hospital of that description. He's like, "Well, someone was here." And it's like, no one could have gotten in. This is the neonatal unit. It's secure. There's no way. You must have, been mistaken.
Right.
He thinks it was an angelic figure.
Right. There's so many different, let's face it, there's so many different beings out there. We're never going to figure it all out. I find it extremely fascinating that you have groups of people from all over the world who have similar experiences with similar types of beings, and the stories just go and go and go, and they don't know each other. They don't. Yeah,
that's the best evidence, I think. People are like, "Well, where's the evidence?" And there's evidence. I mean, we have implant evidence, landing trace evidence, radar evidence, metal fragments. I mean, we've got the evidence, medical evidence, angel hair. But if you take the totality of all of these accounts from people who don't know each other, and many are multiple witness cases, let's face it, there's no way ever this could be made up. It's just not a possibility.
No, I completely agree with you. And, there's no reason for people, like the descriptions they give all match, right down to the demeanor for the most part. I think you're always going to have, I'll back up a minute. You've done the show here many times. And I always, I love the fact that the stories are always, for the most part, very benign. And you're not afraid to throw in, well, this guy didn't have a very good experience, but, you punched him in the face, so this is what happens, right? So,
yeah, I mean, these things do happen.
Exactly. But I find that for the most part, they're all very benign experiences. And when they're not, at least with the people you've interviewed, it's mostly because of the fact that you're fighting back, you're being aggressive, and in a lot of these cases, they're like the ET is pretty much defending themselves, right? So I don't. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I do get all kinds of cases. They run a bell curve. Some people are like, "This is absolutely lovely. I loved it. Everything about it was great." Yeah. More often, it's a mixed bag, starting out super scary.
Right.
absolute trauma, PTSD. I can't sleep. I've got nosebleeds. I'm having nightmares.
Right.
Somebody is watching me.
Right.
I don't like this. And then they start having more experiences and they're healed. And they start having major psychic experiences. And more encounters continue. And they realize, well, you know what? This is not so bad. I wouldn't trade it for anything. That doesn't always happen. So I've interviewed people who are like, it was demonic from day one, and I still think it's demonic. I mean, the guy's super religious, and I have to respect that.
Right. Right. Yeah, I've heard that as well. You know, it is a pretty fine line, especially when I realized, because as a researcher, you know, within the paranormal field for like 2 decades, at least half of the people I've worked with have also been having contact, or they've been experiencers. So now, you know, through the years of doing the show and such, and hearing people such as yourself coming on saying, oh no, they can growl, they can hiss, they can do all kinds of things, and that mirror, you know, even like right down to odors like ozone, and some people would think ozone, they might think it smells really rotten, you know, like they can associate it with a lot of the same stigma that some malevolent hauntings would have. So now I'm sitting here thinking, so at least half of those people were having contact or being abductees, whatever the case may be, and we're experiencing a lot of the same things. And because of probably their conditioning or their faith, they're thinking, no, this is like this type, like it's a demonic.
Well, 100%. Yeah.
Right?
That's absolutely understandable, because we all have a belief system.
Yes.
That's how we view reality, through the lens of our belief system.
Yes.
And you can see this in cultures throughout the world, reaching back through millennia.
Yes.
And I got lucky because my belief system was completely shattered.
Right.
When I was a young man, when I found out UFOs were real, because I didn't think they were real. And then I started having out-of-body experiences. I mean, I was just ruined.
Right.
So I try not to believe anything. I just want to know what's real.
Right.
You know, every time
That's
I try to
tough
believe
one.
Yeah. I mean, I found out giants were real. I'm pretty darn sure giants are real.
Giants are real. Yes.
I mean, that was shattering, because that's not taught in schools. Not really.
It goes against the grain of your, you know, what you're conditioned to believe. I mean, we are conditioned. We have to say, you know, we have a curriculum that we follow in school. We have, you know, faith that is taught to us. You know, we don't just come out of the womb and say, hey, you know, mind you, the children, I think they got it together. Yeah, right. So, yeah, it is. It's really difficult. And then something like that comes out of left field. And you're like, where was I when this stuff was going on? It's really hard. Like, they should teach it, but you're going to find that more and more will keep surfacing, especially as you're talking to all of these people, you know, with all of these experiences, and realize that there's no way, nobody's going to rewrite that kind of history.
Well, I saved a story for you, Michelle, because this one I haven't been able to share. And I know, you know, I said I could give you some scoops.
I'm down for a scoop, Preston.
And this one is just such an interesting story. This is a gentleman I interviewed from New York who had a crazy experience as a kid. Again, 5 years old, in his living room. His dad's off to work. His mom's in the kitchen. His sister is in her room. Right. And he feels like someone is staring at him. And he quickly turns his head to the window and sees somebody drop down. He's like, oh, great. Probably my friends. And he's just watching TV. And sure enough, out of the corner of his eye, he sees him come up. Quickly turns around and drop down before he could see him. So that happened like 3 times. He's like, fine, it's my friends. I know they're playing a trick on me. It's like, it's weird because that window's a little bit higher than they should be able to reach. So he goes up to the window, sticks his thumb in his ears and wiggles his fingers. It sticks out his tongue. Like that. And out pops this figure right here.
Oh my God.
Rising right up. And it's wearing a red vest.
A vest? No, that's cute. Aww.
Yes, and on its shoulder there, you can see it has this little mark.
Insignia of sorts.
Concentric circles.
Wow.
It took him years and years to figure out what that mark meant. But it scares the living daylights out of him. And he stares at it for like 10 seconds and yells at the top of his lungs and turns tail and runs to the kitchen like, Mom, there's a wolf at the door.
A wolf.
Because he hadn't heard of Braze.
Right.
So he didn't know what to think of this. And she comes into the living room. He's dragging her. And he says, go to the window. I'm not going. You go. And she goes to the window. She says, honey, there's nothing there. Stop making stuff up. She's like, no. This happened. He was like crying. So she's like, okay, I believe you.
Right.
It became the family joke. Like he saw a wolf in a red vest at the window.
Poor guy.
And then it happened again. He'd be sitting there. It was always the same scenario. This happened about a half dozen times. And finally he'd look and drop down, and he ran up to the window, did his little thing where he sticks his thumb in his ears, sticks his tongue out, and like little kids do.
Right.
And this gray pops right up again, stares at him from a foot away. And he has a staring contest with this gray. And it's like, who's going to last longer? Well, of course, the gray always won. And the longest he ever lasted was about 30 seconds.
Wow.
Which is a long time.
That is a long time. That's amazing for a 5-year-old to do that.
Isn't that insane?
That is insane. There's something wrong with that child.
No,
the fearless little boy. I know.
His sister saw a gray coming out of his room, came right up to her and scooped her up, and she went running for the door, and it came and it knocked her out and put her back in bed. I talked to her about it. She thought it was a werewolf at first. And now
they're bald, they're hairless. Wow. Oh my God.
And finally, so his weird things were happening, right? He'd wake up, his mom would be staring at the wall in his room, just staring there. He's like, Mom, are you okay? Mom. And she'd wake up. She's like, what are you doing, Mom? She's like, nothing. Just checking on you, and walk into her room, and he'd say, Mom, what were you doing last night? She's like, what are you talking about? So that was weird. And then he wakes up, he's outside, and there's a UFO over him. He's freaking out. That's all he remembers. He's like, something's going on. And because he's still too young to really be outside at night.
Right.
That was the first thing. Then he wakes up, and he's on a craft. And he's holding his mom's hand. His sister is holding his mom's hand, and they're walking down this corridor. And his sister is just bawling. She's quite young. She's 4, he's 5.
Aww.
This may have been 6, she's 5. The mom's in a trance, and they're walking, and there's grays on either side, leading him down this curved corridor. And they said, you go in here, and you, Robert, you go in that room. He's like, I want to stay with my mom. And they said, no. We'll take you to her when you're done. Put him on this table, examine him. There's these 2 grays and a taller human-looking kind of hybrid. And the human-looking hybrid is like, is everything okay? Mm-hmm. And the little grays are like, no, there is a problem. There's a problem with him. We're not sure if he's good for the program. He's got a medical issue. And he's freaking out because he remembers this consciously. It's like medical issue. Great.
5. Yeah.
Yeah. He says it wasn't hugely scary. It was like going to the doctor. It was unpleasant. And then they said, oh, you know what? This medical issue won't manifest until he's an adult. He'll still be able to have children. He's good for the program.
Wow.
And
I think we can pretty much guess at what the program was going to be, right?
And as an adult, he did develop diabetes and just recently a major heart issue. So he's thinking maybe that was it. But he did have kids.
Right.
And he did have some weird incidents with ghostly stuff and figures coming out of his closet, of course. That's where the ETs love closets. They love coming out of the closet. I think they come through the closet that's a way they can come through the house where they're not going to be, run into someone immediately.
Right.
But that closet thing turns up over and over.
Isn't it funny that it does? Because how many young children say they're always terrified of the closet?
Yeah, that's a marker. If your child tells you that, pay
Yes.
close attention.
Yes. Oh,
So
it's true.
as a young kid, he's like, what was it, 14? He would always sleep late. He was living with his grandma. They had a bunch of kids. There was no room for him. So he'd sleep late and stay up all night.
Right.
And one day he wakes up super early. He's like, I'm taking the dog for a walk. And his grandma's like, what? What are you doing up? It's 8 o'clock. He's like, I'm taking the dog for a walk.
Right.
And this is something he did at noon, but never at 8 o'clock.
Right.
But he did. He felt compelled. This is by the Susquehanna River. And was walking through the fields with his dog, and his dog barks. And there's this weird figure in a pink lycra jumpsuit. Before there was lycra, right? Before it was certainly popular. And he's looking at this figure, and he's like, oh gosh, it comes up to their head. It's all the way around. Looks bald. The skin is super pale. Because he couldn't, first it was just the back side that he was seeing. But then he saw a side view. So he's creeping up to this figure, going around this huge mound of dirt. It was a freshly plowed field. And he's right up close to it, right? And comes around this mound of dirt. Figure is gone. It's impossible because it's a huge quarter-mile field.
Right.
Figure could not have disappeared. And he knows it was there. His dog saw it. It was picking leaves and putting them in a little pouch. You know how ETs love to do that.
Right.
So he's like, well, that was weird. I don't know what to make of that. Goes home, and his grandma's like, where the heck have you been? It's noon. You know, you usually take the dog for a half an hour walk, sometimes 40 minutes. He's been gone 2.5 hours.
Wow.
So like, I think I had missing time. I'm like, yeah, it sounds like it.
Wow. Do you think, I mean, children seem to be, obviously, because, you know, generational. Like, I didn't have any fear at all of ET. Like, I remember, now I can remember things that I didn't know then. But however, in my adolescent years, I became very aggressive with the experiences, not you know, thinking they were paranormal experiences as well. You know, it sort of changes you a little bit. Do you think, like, do they go through a spell where they're, you know, a certain way as children, and does it get more like aggressive as they get into their adolescent years, into adult years?
In a sense, because I think what happens is there is an interest in genetics, and some people do agree to this whole hybrid baby program. And and when someone becomes a young adult and they've gone through puberty, their experiences will ramp up. And this is when, you know, we're starting to take on the training that we're getting to be afraid of strangers and anything weird and unexplained. And we're dealing with our own identity issues, and we're very emotional as teenagers. Anyway.
Yes.
So yeah, this is when the child starts to grow up and become very fearful. Sometimes, not always. Like Dolly, she's like 14 years old, and they started coming for her big time. And she's like, that's it. I'm going to figure out what's going on.
Yes.
I'm not going to be afraid. She's,
you
know, she's a Valkyrian. She's just going to face it. And eventually that's usually what happens. Like, you know what, I'm just going to call these dreams. I don't want to think about it. Just want it to go away. I don't like it. And others are like, this keeps happening. I've got to figure this out.
Yes.
And I go under hypnosis, or I'm just going to remember it. So
that's tough, though. Do you recommend that? Because there's no turning back once you take that step, right?
Right. Well, I mean, there is. You can say, okay, now I know, and that's it. I'm going to shelve it.
Wipe it out. Wipe it out. Wipe it out. Yeah.
I only recommend hypnosis if a person fulfills a few qualifications. I know it works. I will say that, but it's got to be in the right hands. It's got to be done by a professional. Because if the hypnotist has their own belief system, they can overlay it over that person's experience.
That's true.
And this has actually happened. So that would be one, what I don't want to call it a qualification, but an advice or a warning. But I only recommend it if you've had a clear-cut case of missing time, because there is false memory syndrome. It is possible to create stuff out of nothing. And you don't want to do that. only if you have some memory of actual contact, like a UFO or a flash of a being. Almost everyone who goes through hypnosis already has that.
Right. Right.
And if you're suffering from anxieties that are making a normal life difficult, like you can't sleep in your bed. One guy I knew who was sleeping under his own bed as an adult.
Right. I know people like that.
Yeah. Or they
you say that now I'm sitting here going,
one guy, he wouldn't sleep in his bed. He had an encounter and slept on the couch for about 10 years. Like that's going to stop them. He's like, I know, but I couldn't do it. I just could not sleep in my own bed.
Right. It's funny because even people who've gone on to, like I look at our mutual friend, Reverend Michael Carter.
Right.
And he's avidly, research and speaks very calmly about it. No, yeah, like great experiences. But yet he even goes, I get nervous when I'm alone at night if my wife is away. There's that inner, that inner insecurity about it, maybe.
Yeah, almost all contacts that I've talked to have a feeling of being watched.
Really? Yeah.
It's just the sense like someone's staring at me.
Yeah, no doubt. I know. It's interesting. The journey continues, and this is your latest book. So where can people find this book?
It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, other online retailers should have it, bookstores. If you go to my website, just punch in my name, it should take you there. You can read excerpts. You can also contact me. And I'm all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Right.
And I'm putting stuff out on my YouTube channel, which is going to feature, of course, some of the cases and others, because I know there are people who can't afford books or don't have time to read and just prefer a more visual format. And certainly not about the money for me, because you're not going to get rich doing this.
Right, that's true. Right.
So I just want people to know, because
this is you doing your part with the whole awareness thing, right?
Yeah. I think it's important people know this stuff, because it is a lot more common and people are struggling. They have no recourse. They can't talk to some of their own family. That breaks my heart sometimes.
Yes.
When kids are going to their parents and their parents don't believe them.
That's really difficult. You end up having kids get themselves into some real trouble, and they develop that anxiety and that fear, and you have to listen to your kids. Not that kids can't be, they can weave a tale. Let's put it that way. But there's also a lot of truth to it.
One thing I want to say real quick is,
of course,
one of the things I like about this book is it does feature cases from the U.S., but I've got cases in Canada, case from Argentina, case from Peru, case from France, case from England, Australia, all over the world. It's the coolest thing, because you get a little bit of a different cultural perspective from, say, a guy down in Argentina.
Right.
Which is awesome.
And it just goes to show you that it comes from all walks of life. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, or like you say, you're a mechanic, you're a housewife, you're a professional person, you're a child, you're an elderly person. It's happening to everybody. There's no prerequisite for who this happens to, aside from the fact that we're all meant to have these experiences.
One lady was a waitress. There's a mechanic, bank manager, a pilot, all kinds of people from all walks of life.
Right.
It's very cool.
And Dolly says it right. We're all one.
Yep.
Absolutely. You tell him, Dolly. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. I know Amelia just like,
Yes, I miss Bubbles. Where's Bubbles?
I know Bubbles isn't here. Bubbles is tending to her daughter, and that's okay. She'll be back next week, hopefully. Right. And I know she just really hated missing this, and extends her hellos and I'm sorry's, and but you're coming back on, I think, in November. Let me just go double check this. You are back on just November 29th. And for those listening, Dolly will be on November 2nd. Also, frequent flyer.
I might have another book by that time.
Well, the way you're going, I wouldn't be surprised if you did.
I'm working on it. Not from here, volume 5. That's my next project.
Oh, yes?
Oh, yeah.
Is it going to be ready by then?
I don't know. It's so hard to predict.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot that goes into it, and especially when you're dealing with so many people who are giving the stories, because I know you take great pride in how you tell the stories, and you're very, very careful with people, and you want them to feel good about what you write.
Everyone, their chapter, we went over it. Everyone who's in this book got to go over it and make sure it was accurate.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. And you're careful with people. And that's why they come to you. Right? So, well, thank you. I appreciate you spending a couple of hours with me. It's just been a perfect way to end a crazy day. And with that being said, everybody, thank you all in the chat room for tuning in tonight. And I love to see all this love for Preston. Yeah, we all love you, Preston. Yeah. So
I love you all too.
I know. Oh, it's always fantastic. I always love having you on. It's, like I say, open door policy. You know, we always love it when you join us. Like I said, I know Amelia's just, hating the fact that she can't be on tonight, but I know she's listening as well. So everybody, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to everybody in chat. You make it that much better, and we appreciate you so very much. Thank you all for Just Coffee. Thank you to Dr. Snick. Thank you to Steve McGinnis. Big thank you to Preston Dennett and Dolly, who we know is in the chat room manning the fort. Thank you. Next week, we're bringing on 2 new faces on Wednesday night, Daniel Duke and Teresa Duke. They are the great-grandchildren of Jesse James. And they're actually booked for a couple of shows because there's just that much information. So you're going to have to tune in and check them out. It's going to be a fantastic show. Thursday night, we welcome back Dennis Stone, the owner of America's Stonehenge. And the first show was just unbelievable, and we've had so many requests to bring him back, and we listened, so they are coming back on, or he is coming back on, and he's always got great pictures to show. And thank you. I do try. Anyway, guys, please have a great weekend. Be safe. Kind of behave, but be safe. Did I say that already? And we want to see you here next week. Don't miss Preston and Dolly Monday night on the Lightgate, 9 p.m. Eastern. Who's your special guest coming on Monday?
Marilyn Hughes. She's an out-of-body expert. I'm super excited. I've got like 10 of her books, I think.
Oh, wow.
She helped teach me how to do this.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I just love her.
I love it. So you heard it, right? You heard Preston. Check him out. So we shall see you next week, guys. Have a great weekend and good night.